Meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 30 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food, pursuant to the order of reference of Wednesday, February 24th, 2021, and the motion adopted by committee on March 9th, 2021. The committee is resuming its study of Bill C-206, an act to amend the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act, qualifying farming fuel. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House order of January 25th, 2021. And therefore, members are attending in person, in the room, and remotely using Zoom application. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. So you are aware the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. I would like to take this opportunity to remind all participants to this meeting that screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted.
In order to ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to outline a few rules. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. If you're on the video conference, please click on the microphone to unmute yourself. Those in the room, your microphone will be controlled as normal by the Proceedings and Verification Officer. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. When you do not have the floor, please mute yourself.
Our witness, I'd like to remind members that amendments for Bill C-206 must be sent to the clerk before Friday, May 7th at 5 p.m. So if you have any amendments to propose. So now I'd like to welcome our witness from the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food, Mr. Warren Goodlett, Director General, Research and Analysis Directorate, Strategy Policy Branch. Welcome, Mr. Goodlett, and Matt Perry, Director General, Policy Development and Analysis Directorate, Strategy Policy Branch. And from the Department of Finance, we have Phil King, Director General, Sales Tax Division, Tax Policy Branch, and Mr. Gervais Coulombe, Senior Director, Excise Sales Tax Division, Tax Policy Branch. Welcome to both of you. And from the Department of the Environment, Judy Meltzer, Director General, Carbon Markets Bureau, Environmental Protection Branch. So I understand that there will be just one opening statement for all departments, and it'll be 5 minutes. So whoever wants to do the opening statement, the floor is yours.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chair. As mentioned, my name is Matt Perry. I'm the Director General of the Policy Development and Analysis Directorate at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. And thank you for the opportunity to be here today to talk about Bill C-206 and the government's initiatives related to carbon pollution pricing in the agriculture sector. I'll start by noting that climate change is one of the greatest challenges of our time. Addressing it requires engagement from all parts of Canadian society. Canada's farmers and ranchers are part of the climate solution. Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada is actively engaged on many fronts to support the agriculture sector in reducing emissions, from scientific research to direct support for farmers across the country. We are working to develop solutions that are effective, efficient, and ensure farmers can grow their businesses while reducing emissions. Greenhouse gas emissions from Canada's agriculture sector have been relatively stable since 2005. According to Canada's National Inventory Report for 2021, greenhouse gas emissions from the agriculture sector in Canada were approximately 73 megatons of carbon dioxide equivalent in 2019, the last year for which data is available. Most of these emissions, about 60 megatons, are from biological emissions from livestock and crop production. The remaining 13.6 megatons are from on-farm fuel use, which includes fuel for machinery such as tractors and combines, as well as heating sources. And these emissions have remained relatively stable since 2005. Of the fuel emissions, about 10 megatons are from on-farm transportation, gasoline and diesel, which are currently exempt from pollution pricing. And about 3.6 megatons are from stationary combustion, which includes grain drying and barn heating operations, which are not exempt. So based on how the carbon pollution price is structured, this means that approximately 5% of greenhouse gas emissions from agricultural production are currently covered by pollution pricing. La tarification de la pollution par le carbone.
Carbon pollution pricing is considered the most efficient means to drive innovation and energy efficiency in order to reduce emissions. Since 2019, every jurisdiction in Canada has had a price on pollution. Provinces and territories can design their own systems aligned with minimum national standards or opt for the federal system. The federal carbon pollution pricing system has been specifically designed to account for the agriculture sector's unique circumstances. The government announced in February 2021 that it would commit to new rebates for our on-farm fuel use, such as grain drying, in order to support food producers and encourage new investments in sustainable technologies. As announced in Budget 2021, the government intends to return a portion of the proceeds from the federal fuel charge directly to farmers.
In Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Ontario, the provinces where the federal fuel charge applies. It is estimated that farmers in those jurisdictions would receive $100 million in the first year, and that this figure is expected to increase as the price on pollution rises. Further details will be provided by the government later in 2021. Also announced in Budget 2021, $50 million of the recently announced $165 million Agricultural Clean Technology Program will focus on grain drying technologies, and $10 million will focus on powering farms with clean energy. Ces deux éléments du programme des technologies propres.
These two components of the Agricultural Clean Technology Program will help support farmers to invest in more efficient and new technology that further reduces on-farm fuel use, and work is underway to develop and launch these initiatives as soon as possible.
Along with existing initiatives under the Canadian Agricultural Partnership, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada is working with farmers and other agricultural stakeholders to reduce emissions and fight climate change. In closing, the measures announced in Budget 2021 will provide relief for farmers and backstop jurisdictions while also supporting the sector to reduce fossil fuel use through improved efficiency and new technologies. Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada is working to support farmers today while developing and implementing policies that will help reduce emissions for tomorrow. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. And before we go to the question round, as you know, we only have one witness for the second panel, so we'll extend this one up until 6 Atlantic, 5 Eastern time, and it'll give roughly 30 minutes for our single witness in the second panel. So I'll just go down the list, the order of questions. I'll just go down, and if I have to, I'll come back up. We have about an hour and 10 minutes to do that. So welcome, Mr. Lawrence et Madame Posé. Merci. Bienvenue.
Mr. Chair.
Welcome, Madame Posé.
Just a point of clarification.
Sure.
We could do other business. Like we wouldn't have to extend this round. Like we could do the same as this round, a half an hour, and there might be some other business the committee could do after, if there was 30 minutes left after the second panel. I think that would work better.
Yeah, we don't have any business scheduled at this stage, so after discussion with the clerk.
Okay.
We're keeping the time and just going to give a bit, because we have three witnesses here, three different departments. So I think it'll balance things out, because we only have one in the last. I think that's how we're going to proceed. Mr. Lawrence?
Before my time starts, Chair, I would gently suggest that we really only have we have three witnesses, but only one statement and only one stakeholder group in both. Though I think it would be more equitable to split the time. And I'm actually quite looking forward to the evidence being provided by the Agri-Innovation in the next section. So I would kindly suggest that we split the time as opposed to leaving the AIC only with a half an hour.
Yeah, so yes, but we do have three different departments. I circulated that notice this morning and hadn't heard back, so that's how we've planned it with the clerk. Mr. Blois.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I think where we have three witnesses, notwithstanding what Mr. Lawrence has said about our next witness in the next hour, I think using your discretion, you're very fair and usually quite good in this committee. So whether or not it's exactly half, or whether or not you do allow a little bit of additional time, given the fact that the majority and the lion's share bulk of our witnesses are here in this panel, I'm sure Mr. Lawrence will trust your discretion and hope we can proceed forward. Thank you.
I will bow to the chair and defer to Monsieur Bois on this rare occasion here. I'm sure you wouldn't steer me wrong, would you, gentlemen?
Certainly appreciate that, Mr. Lawrence. And on that, you can start the round. 6 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Lawrence.
All right, and thank you. And whoever of the three witnesses wishes to respond, or all three, that's fine for me. So thank you very much. And I agree with you that climate change is a real and serious pressing issue. And I think that has as a consensus in this panel and in this committee. That's not in doubt and not in discussion. One of the issues that I have is, and it's not really mine, it's what the stakeholders have said to me. They have stakeholder after stakeholder said that we prefer Bill C-206 for a number of reasons, but one of the primary ones is that money is an exemption. It stays in our pocket, and it's having a real financial impact. So while the credit system may be better than nothing, the idea of it coming to government, coming back, and we don't have the details on it really isn't enough. And if the government is so generous and they do a fantastic job with the credit, there's nothing stopping them from repealing Bill C-206 in the future once they have this credit system up and running. So wouldn't you want to give the farmers a break with respect to Bill C-206? And if it is the government's discretion, they can, of course, repeal it if their credit system is so generous that farmers no longer require the exemption.
Yeah, hi there. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I can respond to that. I can respond directly to why perhaps a support program rather than an exemption. There's a couple of reasons. There's some technical issues. For example, the delivery of natural gas and propane is slightly different than the delivery of gasoline and diesel, which is exempt. It's generally piped in directly and continuously. And you may have a situation where the farm is not just the farm operations receiving the natural gas, but also the house is being fed by the natural gas as well. And so it would be difficult to distinguish and take the fuel charge off the farm operation use versus the house use when it's a single meter. So you could have somebody who's housing heating, or they might have a barbecue hooked up to the natural gas, and that would be exempt from the fuel charge. So there's some technical issues. There's also the issue of the price signal. At the very least, with the ex post relief, you're maintaining the price signal. So it still does present an incentive for farmers to find more efficient, greener, lower GHG emitting ways of engaging in their farm operations. And the ultimate objective really is to have nobody pay this fuel charge. It's the change in behavior via technology. And where farmers can't do this, well, they're getting the money back. So they're made, there's financial support for them. So those are the two main reasons why it would be, or why it's been chosen.
Thank you very much. Also, which has come across in the testimony and in Agri-Innovation, the group that we're going to hear from the next panel, they've put together a great report, in fact, demonstrating the fact that, well, there are some technologies, they are just in their novel phase and are not able to be widespread. So the price signal really goes nowhere. I would also call on the government for being hypocrites in this matter, as they just recently, it came to light in a National Post article that they're giving DuPont a huge exemption for hydrofluorocarbons, which are said to be 1,000 times worse than carbon dioxide. And so while this billion-dollar international company is getting an exemption, we won't give an exemption to farmers. I would think this price signal would apply to billion-dollar corporations in addition to farmers. Is that not true?
Well, I think that's a question you'd have to pose to the minister and to the government. I can explain to the policy that's being put forward in the budget and maybe talk about Bill C-206, but I couldn't answer that question. I'm sorry.
Okay, and then with respect to the elasticity of the market, though, are you aware right now of any viable technologies that farmers could massively change to avoid using propane and natural gas, particularly in grain drying, but in other uses on the farm?
I might have to turn to my colleagues at Agriculture or Environment to see if they may be aware of those.
So thanks for the question. I would note that there are technologies under development that are emerging that I think hold some promise in this area. I think that the committee, I believe in its previous deliberations, has referred to triple green as one example of that. But I think our understanding is that this is new technology and it's not yet at a stage where it is being widely adopted.
So exactly. So it will take time for the credit system to evolve, and then that credit system could be used to fund. But it would be, would you disagree with me that it would be unreasonable that it would be at least 5, if not 10 years before any type of massive change could be done to grain drying? In the meantime, the farmers will be picking up the cost.
It's an interesting question. I'm afraid I don't have the expertise in terms of that, the duration that you referred to, but certainly some time would be involved. I can endeavor to speak with my colleagues to see if I can get further information on that.
And so when we look at this, you would say, okay, so we've got these farmers, and I've seen the bills, and they're literally, some of them are tens of thousands of dollars. Farmers are price takers; they have very thin margins, and as a family farm seems to struggle out in existence, we are just going to put it all on the farmers until we get the credit system, or we have maybe some novel technologies. Until then, we'll just wait for the farmers, or would we pass C-206? Give the farmers a break right now. The government can at any time repeal it if there's a great breakthrough in technology.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, Mr. Lawrence, that time is out. Perhaps they can answer your question later on that. So we'll move to a second member, Mr. Blois, for 6 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our witnesses. I'll start perhaps with Mr. King or someone from Environment. When I look at the actual, of course, the bill 2C06, it's relatively straightforward. It's just trying to amend the definition of qualifying farm fuel. But my understanding, when we look at the entire Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act, is there's also definitions for eligible farming activity that qualifies, and also eligible farming machinery, which this particular bill does not address at all. Would it be your position that the challenge, despite I would say the noble intent from Mr. Lawrence in relation to this bill, is flawed in the sense that it doesn't actually address the activities and the machinery that's needed to perhaps capture grain drying or heating of barns and other facilities?
Yeah, hi there. Thank you. Yes, happy to take that question. I can certainly give you our view, or my view as an official from the Department of Finance. I want to give you a caveat first, though, however, and that is the administration of the GGPPA, so the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act. That's the responsibility of the Canada Revenue Agency. So ultimately, sort of formally and officially, it would be the CRA that would have to opine on this. But I'm happy to share my view. And we did design the program. We know its intent, and we did draft the legislation. So we are reasonably familiar with it. So that caveat aside, Yes, you are correct. We don't believe that C206 is specific enough in that it doesn't discuss eligible farm machinery. It does just talk about the fuels involved and not the machinery that those fuels would be involved in. So yes.
And so if this were to pass, basically it would just open up the eligible types of fuel that can be used under the existing activities and machinery that are already deemed eligible under the Act by the Government of Canada to date.
That's our view, yes. So if you had a combine harvester that ran on propane or natural gas, then it would be related to the fuel. But it's too vague. We don't think it's specific enough as regards to heating or grain drying equipment.
Mr. King, you mentioned about the price mechanism, and basically other stakeholders have come before this committee and spoken about the importance of keeping a price mechanism in place, perhaps finding a way to be able to reimburse producers for some of the costs, but to still maintain a competitiveness to change behavior where applicable. Can you speak a little bit? You mentioned that, of course, the government plans to give further detail of its plan that was in Budget 2021, but we do know that there's about $100 million, as you mentioned, or was mentioned by Mr. Perry, that would go back to producers. How do we come up with the number of 100 million? I'm assuming it's relatively equitable to what we feel that producers actually pay in the backstop provinces where it's in place.
Yes, precisely. So the I can walk you through the $100 million figure. So you start with the 4 provinces where the backstop applies. So Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Ontario. And using data from Statistics Canada on farm operating expenditures, it's roughly about $50 billion annually in those 4 provinces. About 3/4 of 1 percentage point, so less than 1 percentage point of that total $50 billion comes from expenditures on natural gas and propane. It's about 3/4 of a percentage point. And about 1/3 of that 3/4 of a percentage point, so about 0.2% of total farm operating expenditures are related to the carbon price. And that's on natural gas and propane. So that's exactly where the $100 million figure comes from. And again, it's those 4 provinces, and it's at the current price of $40 per ton.
And so I appreciate that explanation. That's clear. In terms of the way when you look across the country, we have the price on pollution. In backstop provinces, the actual amount collected is then returned on a per capita basis per se. Whereas if you're someone that's a higher polluter, you might have to pay more than what you actually, you're essentially, you paid more into the system than what you'll get back. If you're someone that paid less into the system, you might get a check to reimburse and top you up. How do you intend, and I know it's early days, so to the extent that you can tell me, how do you intend to be able to take that 100 million and distribute it back on a per capita basis with the actual farmers to ensure that we're incentivizing and those farmers that are changing behavior are rewarded as such?
I can't, unfortunately, you're right. It is early days, and it's too early days to be specific about that. Those details are still being determined. I wouldn't say it would be a per capita basis necessarily. That's one of several options and one of many dimensions across which you could return this funding. But I think the important point perhaps is that the fuel charge that's associated with natural gas and propane use totals about $100 million, pardon me. And that's what's been committed to be returned to farmers in the 4 jurisdictions.
And is it fair to say, though, Mr. King, given the fact that, yes, it is early days, that there will be a consideration on how to continue to incentivize farmers where applicable? I take notice that we've had conversations on this committee that some of the technologies are not necessarily readily available, but where applicable, I assume there's going to be some type of mechanism to try to incentivize to change behavior to meet the 10% of emissions that are tied to agriculture. I mean, farmers are already doing great work, but I assume we want to help continue to incentivize that behavior.
That's correct. And that's the intention of the 2 measures announced in the recent budget. One is maintaining the price signal, but returning the funds where it's not possible to adopt more efficient machinery or technology. And the second aspect, the it was my colleague Matt spoke to, the Agri-Tech fund that was announced and the additional resources for that in the budget.
I think that's the end of my time, unfortunately, but I'd like to thank the witnesses.
Exactly on time. Thank you, Mr. Blois. Maintenant, Monsieur Perron.
And now, Mr. Perron, for 6 minutes. Mr. Perron, are you there? Or is it Ms. Posé? It will be Madame Posé. Go ahead, Madame Posé. Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to say that I sit on the Environment Committee, and I feel quite comfortable with the discussion here today. My first question would be to Mr. King. You said that you're well aware of the bill because you drafted it. Do I understand correctly that in the first version there was no exemption for propane and natural gas, but now you are creating that exemption?
Yes, thank you for the question. I should clarify, I did not personally draft the GGPPA. We have a team of very capable legislative drafters at the Department of Finance. There is no exemption in the bill for propane and natural gas use. And if I understand your question correctly, the measure proposed in the budget, it doesn't consider an exemption either. What it does consider is taking some of the fuel charge proceeds that would be paid by farmers on their use of propane and natural gas, and then returning those funds back to farmers. So there's no exemption. They would still pay the price, but they would get those funds back.
D'accord, merci.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And now, earlier, Mr. Lawrence was saying that the time to move to new technologies could take 5 to 10 years, and we know that we're in a climate emergency now. So I'd ask Mr. Perry, when you said that it will be new clean technologies to reduce the fuel use on the farm, but you didn't name any of those new technologies. So are you aware of some of them?
Thank you for the question. So as I mentioned, one of the examples that has been discussed is the triple green process using biomaterial to provide the energy for grain drying as opposed to propane or natural gas. So that's one example. But the government is very much open to supporting the development and adoption of that and or other technologies. And just in response to the previous question, there was significant funding announced as part of the Strengthened Climate Plan and again noted in the budget for the Agricultural Clean Technology program. And as announced in Budget 2021, $50 million of that funding will be set aside to focus on new technologies related to grain drying. So there's certainly a priority being put on technologies in this area.
Monsieur.
I'll interrupt you, Mr. Perry, because I have limited time, as you know. I wanted to ask you, sometimes things are being done in Europe, and we try to apply the same thing here, and often people's first reaction is, well, but is it going to work? So we don't necessarily base ourselves on experiments that have happened elsewhere. So are you aware of any technologies that have been implemented elsewhere that would be easy to implement here?
I'm not personally aware, but I could check with my colleagues in the department who are more familiar on the technology questions.
Oui, puis je vous demande.
Yes, thank you. And I would ask you perhaps to send the documents to the committee. Now, I'd like to come back to the issue of the exemption for farmers. And I don't know who, perhaps the representative from the Department of Finance, Mr. King, might say or answer. Do you think farmers would rather have money back or be exempted at the outset? And I'm thinking of really creating a dependency on the government. So have you consulted farmers to find out whether they'd prefer the exemption at the source or get that money back later on?
Yes, thank you for the question. No, we haven't consulted. I mean, I think that you probably would have heard, I imagine, yourself via the committee, via witnesses you have had. I can imagine it's an answer for the farmers to make themselves, that they probably would prefer a complete exemption from this rather than the money coming back after the fact. But no, we haven't reached out to farmers at the Department of Finance. I don't know if my colleagues have anything to add.
Merci Phil. Peut-être très rapide.
Thank you, Phil. Perhaps just very briefly to complete the answer, you have to remember that when the bill was drafted, there were consultations. It was preceded by a technical document in 2017. And through all of that, there was an awareness created, and there was a broad consultation of Canadians, including agricultural operators. And when you look at the federal fuel charge, which is currently in effect in the 4 provinces in question, it does not apply at many emissions that come from the agricultural sector. And biological examples, emissions are an example that come from the animals. So these are very significant emissions for greenhouse gases. Yes, indeed. Do I have any time, Mr. Chairman? 1 second, and I'm sorry, that's it. Oh, I'm sorry. No, but you did a great job replacing Mr. Perron. Thank you very much.
Oh, before I go, could I ask all the witnesses to keep their cameras on, because it's hard to tell if they're still around. So if you don't mind, you can all leave your cameras on while you're here. So thank you. And now, Mr. McGregor, go ahead for 6 minutes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. Mr. King, maybe I'll start with you. Just in the previous exchange that you had with Mr. Blois, where you expressed, I guess, a little bit of doubt as to whether C206 was drafted in a way that would give the CRA clarity about what its intended purpose was. Because when I look through the existing definitions present in the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act, it's quite clear that, you know, growing grain and harvesting it falls under the definition of farming, and that the machinery used, I think, for drying it could be found under eligible farming machinery. I think, you know, it's a stationary machine. It's an industrial machine on the property. Are you still quite sure that even if we're just making this sort of narrow definition to what a qualifying farm fuel is, that there will still be a misconception as to what it's actually being, like, what its intended purpose is?
Yes, thank you. Again, with the caveat that it would really be up to the CRA to finally determine this, our view at the Department of Finance would be that, yes, it is a bit too vague. And in fact, you yourself in the question just mentioned it could. It talks about an industrial machine, but there's no mention of sort of a heating machine or thermal or heating, ventilation or air conditioning type machinery. So it is somewhat vague still. So yeah, we do have some, I suppose, doubts about that. But again, final word would have to go to the CRA on that.
Okay, appreciate that clarification. With the existing act, with the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act, is it true that diesel and gasoline were mentioned under a qualifying farm fuel because currently there are no viable alternatives to those two fuels being used for the vast majority of farming equipment?
I don't know that that's the specific reason. I think that's probably because of the bulk of the fuels used on farms are gasoline and light fuel oil or diesel.
But wouldn't one assume that they were specifically listed because they in fact are the vast majority of fuels used on farms? Farmers don't really have an alternative to using diesel in their combines at present, to like for the horsepower and torque that is needed to do their operations.
I mean, one of the considerations that will go into this is that, you know, farmers are trade exposed and there is a limit to how much that they can pass prices along. And I think that's reflected in the overall carbon pricing regime, where, as we heard at the beginning, the vast majority of emissions from the farming sector are not priced. And it's a balancing act. And I think this was part of the consideration that went into that. My colleague Gervais talked about the consultations back in 2017. So, you know, balancing those competitiveness considerations with the need to reduce GHG emissions to address the climate. I mean, that's why I think it was they were included or excluded in this case by being listed. I don't know, my colleague Gervais was involved from the very beginning in this program. I don't know, Gervais, if you have anything to add to my answer on that.
Yeah, maybe just for completeness, the federal carbon pricing instrument was not created in isolation. It was part of a process as part of the Pan-Canadian framework for pricing carbon pollution. And from the onset, it was clear that one of the models that the federal government was looking at was the provincial carbon tax in British Columbia. And when you look at the specificities of that carbon tax, there is indeed an exemption for certain fuels used on farm activities, including diesel and gasoline. So that definitely played an important role in implementing a similar exemption as part of the federal backstop instrument.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a resident of BC, and it's nice to see that we were able to provide that model. But yeah, no, thank you for your clarification on that. I guess, you know, the crux of my question was just really, we have heard from farmers themselves, and I agree, there are some promising technologies out there, but the feedback we've heard so far from farmers is that they're not really close to a level that's scalable. The final question I have, and maybe Mr. King, you're the best to answer this. With Budget 2021, it mentioned that there would be a quote, a return of a portion of the proceeds from the price on pollution directly to farmers. How are you going to calculate that portion? You know, portion, when someone says you're going to have a portion of the pie, it doesn't mean the whole pie. So can you tell us a little bit about the calculations that are going into play there?
Yeah, yes, certainly. And it will be to reiterate an answer that I provided slightly there. So that portion will be $100 million at a price of $40 per ton on carbon. And as the price goes up, that $100 million will go up too. But that just looks at the total operating expenditures of farms in the 4 backstop jurisdictions, the amount that they spend on natural gas and propane, and the amount of that expenditure on natural gas and propane that comes from the fuel charge. That's where the 100 million or the proportion that you speak to comes from.
Okay, thank you. I think that's my time, Chair.
Yes, thank you, Mr. McGregor. And now for the second round, for 5 minutes, Mr. Steinley. Go ahead, Mr. Steinley, for 5.
Thank you very much. Mr. King, when was the last time you were on a farm west of Manitoba?
I don't recall.
That would make sense because one of the comments you made was sometimes you couldn't differentiate between natural gas going to a house and a grain dryer or a barn. And there isn't an instance where a natural gas line doesn't have its own meter that goes to a barn or a grain dryer, because many farms actually have different farmyards for their grain dryers and their house. So that comment I was very surprised by, because that just doesn't happen anymore. You could always tell what natural gas was going to be used for heating a home and heating a barn or drying grain or running an irrigation pump. So that was a bit surprising to me. Mr. Perry, you said many times innovation is driven by carbon pricing or a price on carbon in agriculture. Do you believe that statement?
I would say yes. I mean, that is
okay. No, that's perfect. So I'd ask, could you tell me the tax that was enforced on farmers that led to the innovation of zero tillage?
A tax on farmers that led to zero tillage. I don't believe there was a tax in that area.
Yeah, that was an amazing innovation that led to great soil conservation and the ability of farmers to have better soil quality and more nutrients in their soil. Mr. Perry, could you tell me the innovation that led to crop rotation for grazing for ranchers across Canada? And what tax led to that innovation?
It was done through beneficial management practices and sharing of information amongst farmers. I don't believe there was a tax involved in that. So
I agree with you 100%. I think innovation and conversations through farmers and sharing data has led to amazing innovation in the agriculture sector. So I'd put on the record saying and having very, very senior people in the Department of Agriculture say innovation is brought forward in agriculture by carbon pricing is something I think a lot of people that I represent and a lot of people I know would have a difficult time believing that's the only way to get the innovation. And I think that's what this bill is about when you talk about it, is you can't get the innovation. And I know we talked about there might be innovative and new technologies for grain drying. There might be, but that's 5 to 10 years off. The reason, Mr. Perry, you couldn't mention one is because there isn't an innovation right now that could dry 50,000 bushel bins other than natural gas or propane. And we're a long ways off of that. And I think this bill that Mr. Lawrence is proposing is that exemption to give farmers a chance to continue to do what they do well, because there are farmers in Saskatchewan and Alberta and Manitoba that pay tens of thousands of dollars on a carbon tax because of using grain dryers and irrigation pumps. And Mr. King, you talked about irrigation, and my farm still delivers. They have a propane tank, and that propane tank gets delivered by a truck into the yard, and that tank runs a motor that pumps irrigation through the pipes, and it's not just a pipeline. There's still cases where propane does get delivered to on-farm use, and I think Mr. LaRue would have many people that have propane delivered to heat barns in his riding of both. So there's just a couple of things I wanted to point out. Is farming is an agribusiness in Saskatchewan and in Western Canada, and they're very big operations, and these grain dryers are solid equipment, industrial equipment that gets used to keep people fed across this, not only Canada, but the world. And I believe these farmers need this exemption to make sure that they can continue to provide that good service. My final question would be, when it comes to crop rotation, and I know you guys know this very well, but crop rotation is one of the great innovations in agriculture that led to keeping nutrients in the soil. And once again, I'd ask Mr. Perry, was there a tax brought forward that induced crop rotation practices by farmers across Canada?
Thanks for the question. I think you likely know the answer. There was no tax in that regard. But I would note that I don't think I ever said that the carbon pollution pricing was the only tool. It just, in a number of circumstances, it can be efficient and effective in providing a price signal to promote innovation and the development of new technologies.
I appreciate that statement very much. And I know that farmers are as innovative as they can be, because they know that their bottom line is very important, and they'll do whatever they can to innovate, not only for the environment, but for the bottom line, and to ensure that their operation is successful now for the next generation of farmers in Canada. Thank you both very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Steinley. And now we'll go to Mr. Lewis for 5 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Lewis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all our panelists for being here. I appreciate this. Just kind of expanding on my colleagues' questions and line of questioning. It's fantastic that now we can say that all the major political parties agree the importance of the price of pollution, and I'm glad for the Conservatives to change their mind and come on board with that. So I appreciate that, and I do want to say that everyone on this panel, all the parties, we all support farmers, and our government is supporting farmers, and the innovations that were mentioned, the innovations that they're championing. I know that we've got different pillars of ways of supporting them, and we all agree on pricing pollution. We all agree then the government saying that we want to further reduce emission as much as possible, affect the impact of climate change, and continue to help the farmers build resilience, and then support that clean technology, which will also create some jobs. So if I could direct my questions to Mr. Perry off the top, you touched briefly on some new clean technologies which are already emerging. I think specifically you mentioned Triple Green using biofuels. I think that's out of Manitoba, which uses dry heat and biomass fuel. And I've done some studying on that, because in my riding of Kitchener-Conestoga, there's a company called BioN, which is anaerobic digesters, which takes the methane from the composting in the anaerobic digester and turns that into energy. So can you expand on some of the ways that we can use biomass fuel to create heat?
Thank you for the question. I'm afraid I might have to defer on the specific question on biofuels, but I would make note of the investment that I mentioned earlier that was announced in in the climate plan in December that will provide $165 million over 7 years for agricultural clean technologies. And so technologies like the triple green and the firm that you mentioned in your writing would very much be the focus of these type of funds in terms of advancing their development and promoting their adoption and scalability as well. But I mean, again, I can if there is a specific question on technology, I can take that back to colleagues who work in our science and technology branch.
So if I'm understanding the clean technology program, which you're saying about 10 million goes to powering farms for advancing developments, are there other besides the grain dryers that was 50 million specifically? Can this be used for to reduce costs? Because we've heard about the low margins of farmers and they want to be able to reduce costs in many ways. So would this involve solar? Would this involve powering tractors and equipment as well?
Yes, the funding would be applied in a number of areas. As you mentioned, there is funding set aside. About $10 million was identified in budget 2021 to help move farmers off diesel fuel. About 50 million was set aside for grain drying technology, and then the remaining would be broadly available for various technologies and under development.
Fantastic. And I'm not exactly sure which department to ask, but can you, we're talking about the provinces that have this backstop, the 4 provinces. Can you explain what some of the other provinces that are doing in this case to support the agriculture sector, the ones that do not have this backstop federally?
I'm afraid I can't answer that. I don't know if I don't know if any of my colleagues would have information on that. I can take that question back and provide a response to the committee.
Perfect. Okay. That was my line of question. I appreciate that, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Oops, I believe he's on mute.
Who was it directed to? Sorry.
Oh, I was just saying I had finished. I thought my time had expired, I believe.
Oh, I guess it is. Yeah. Thanks for reminding me. Good. Okay. Well, I had a few seconds, but okay. And maintenant, Monsieur or Madame Posé.
And now we'll go to Ms. Posé again. Or no, Mr. Perron is back. 2.5 minutes. Thank you to the witnesses for being here today. Since I didn't have a chance to say that at the beginning. Now, I know that the question was asked previously, but I don't think we got a clear answer. I'd like to know how you explain, and I don't know which one of you will answer this, but the exemption of propane and natural gas, why was that not included in the first version of this bill? Because we understand the idea that gas and diesel were exempted because it's good for production, etc. But most of our witnesses have said that propane and natural gas are less harmful to the climate and to the environment, rather. So there are not many fuels that are available today, despite the fact that there will be more innovations in the near future. But can someone answer me why this wasn't put in at the outset? It seems to me that that's very much in the spirit of the bill. Perhaps I could start, and someone else might wish to complete after. First of all, you have to recall that in terms of the fuel charge, the federal fuel charge, the rate reflects the carbon intensity of each fuel. And therefore, a liter of propane or a liter of natural gas used will produce much less greenhouse gases than the equivalent of a liter of diesel or of gas used. Therefore, if we want to look at the global architecture of the federal fuel charge, it already takes into consideration cleaner fuels. Well, I understand what you're saying, but I'd like you to confirm to me that the most polluting fuels are exempted, and now what we're seeing is that the less polluting ones are not exempted. That's what I can't understand. When the comprehensive policy was put in place, the idea was indeed to base ourselves on the carbon tax model in BC, and the exemption that was included in that and adopted by the Parliament reflects more or less the exemption that was put in place in British Columbia. And when we had discussions with our provincial partners and our territorial partners, we also had to take into account certain provincial systems that didn't have any specific exemptions, period, for the as far as fuels used by farmers are concerned. Thank you, Mr. Coulombe. I'm sorry that your time has expired, Mr. Perron.
For 2.5 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. McGregor.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe my question will go to Mr. Perry with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. There are not many more questions I have really on C206 per se, but I am interested in whether or not the Government of Canada has done an analysis of Canada's carbon sequestration potential in our farms. I know, like in budget 2021, there was $60 million allocated over the next 2 years for the Nature Smart Climate Solutions, and that's really to protect existing wetlands and, you know, help save trees on farms. But I'm just wondering, you know, overall, have we done that in-depth analysis of Canada's agricultural soils and really what our sequestration potential is if we're really going to be depending on them as acting as a carbon sink as a part of our overall fight against climate change? I'm just wondering if you could give the committee an update on that.
Thank you very much for the question. It's a very important issue, and you noted the new program that was announced last year as part of the fall economic statement, what's now referred to as the Agricultural Climate Solutions Fund that Minister Bibeau announced in mid-March. So, and the focus of that program is indeed on accelerating carbon sequestration in agricultural soils. So, I can't speak to specific numbers. I'd have to refer to a colleague from our science and technology branch, but there is commensurate with the level of funding associated with this initiative, $185 million over 10 years. It is identified as it is a key opportunity for the sector, and in terms of in essence effectively mitigating our emissions from in the sector more generally. So it is absolutely a priority for the government, and significant efforts are being made in this area.
Okay, thank you for that answer. That's it for me, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. And now for 5-minute round, Mr. Epp. Go ahead, Mr. Epp, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to allow Mr. Lawrence to begin. Sure, go ahead, Phil.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Epp. Mr. King, I just wanted to go over with follow the line that Mr. McGregor had earlier. When we look at the definitions of C206, to me, it's absolutely clear. In fact, it's crystal clear, and that's in fact what our parliamentary lawyers all said as well, that grain drying is included. If we look in fact and we go, well, what's the definition of farming? Well, farming almost certainly includes the growing of grain. Eligible farm activity, well, that includes the operation of eligible farming machinery. Well, what is an eligible farming machinery? Well, it is an industrial machine or stationary. All of that fits grain drying to a T. Which I have absolutely, I don't understand how you could possibly conceive that grain drying not include of this, and I think it's just silly to say otherwise. Mr. King?
Yeah, I'm not sure of your question, Mr. Lawrence.
Well, I'm asking you, how could you possibly conceive grain drying not being included in this in C206 when it's clearly a farming activity done on a farm with a machine. Are you saying that grain dryer is not a machine? Are you saying that the growing grain is not farming?
Well, I would say in putting legislation together, you have to be very specific. And if this amendment was to move forward, and that's not up to me.
Okay, Mr. King,
it should be clarified.
It's clear. It's crystal clear. It's crystal clear. And in fact, planting is not included in the definition of the farming in this act. But I think you're going to say that planting is. Would you say that planting is part of farming?
Well, again, just to reiterate, I can give you my view. It's up to the CRA to determine finally and once and for all if it is included.
Well, that's funny you should say that, actually. Mr. King, are you aware that CRA in the Income Tax Act has a definition of farming? Yes, and do you know that it includes grain drying? The ultimate arbitrator has already ruled. They say, and I will read from you underneath the definitions of section 248. Okay, it will include, a farm activity will include necessary to turn a harvested product into a saleable product. When grain is wet, it is not saleable. It has to be done. Mr. King, do you understand how silly this sounds right now?
I don't see your point, Mr. Lawrence. If this was to go forward, you want to make it as clear as possible, and to make it as clear as possible.
It is clear. It is clear. The CRA has ruled. They say, and I read to you underneath section 248, any product farming is to include anything to turn a harvested product into a saleable product. That's exactly what grain drying is.
Well, then, if the CRA has spoken, then you have your answer. As I said, it's the CRA which determines this. So
thank you. I'll give the rest of my time to Mr. F. There. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. To Mr. Perry, I believe you stated in your testimony that you said agricultural emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, have been stable since 2005. What does that tell you about the rising production from agriculture since then, rising greenhouse gas emissions from virtually every other segment of our society? What does that tell you about the innovation and the environmental stewardship of the agricultural community?
Well, thank you for the question. I think it states that the sector has made significant progress in reducing the emissions intensity of production and in making, producing agricultural products more sustainably with a lower greenhouse gas emissions content. So I think it speaks to the innovative capacity and performance of the agricultural sector in Canada.
I think it would be fair to state that that's been done in the context of in the absence of a punitive tax.
I mean, the progress has been achieved over a number of years that predates the current carbon pollution pricing system. That's true.
Thank you. What's contemplated? We touched on this earlier in the testimony about the sequestration over that time period. How is that being recognized or contemplated in the present budget bill? Sorry, in moving forward in this budget.
Oh, thanks for the question. So, would note two elements to that. One would be the program I mentioned previously, the Agricultural Climate Solutions Program, that is focused specifically on carbon sequestration. And then as well, there was a subsequent announcement in Budget 2021 that talked about an additional $200 million would be devoted to on-farm action in over 2 years. That would be about.
I guess I was referring to all of sequestration since 2005 or earlier, not moving forward. It was more rhetorical. Thank you.
Okay.
One last question to Mr. King. Is there any confusion in your mind regarding wind fans, innovations that Ontario farmers have put into, and BC farmers, into orchards, into vineyards, as far as that being an eligible farm piece of equipment?
A quick answer, Mr. Perry, if you can.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. That was directed to Mr. King.
Oh, sorry, Mr. King. Sorry. A quick answer, Mr. King, please.
That's something I'd have to look at. I can't answer on the spot like that. It needs due consideration.
Thank you, Mr. King, and thank you, Mr. Els, for 5 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Els.
Hey, thank you. And I guess a lot of great questions have been asked today, so I don't know how many questions that I'll have, but I'd like to thank everybody for attending today. And I see that most of you are working from home, and it's been a great year, and you guys have been successful working from home. I think my question would be to Mr. Perry, and you kind of touched on it. what tools can the federal and provinces put in place to facilitate a transition to greener agriculture?
Thanks for the question. I think there are a number of things the government can do in terms of working, for example, collaboratively with the sector, with scientists. The department has a program called Living Labs that is about working together with farmers in the fields, with scientists to develop beneficial management practices that are very much geared to the local circumstances and conditions in the different regions of Canada. So I think that will be a particularly important area of work going forward to promote. There's been discussion earlier today about the benefits and progress that's been made through cover cropping and no-till, for example. And so I think these, continuing to work with the agricultural community and scientists and other local partners, I think is an important particularly important area, as well as I mentioned earlier about clean technology and advancing the development and adoption of clean technology.
Maybe I could just jump in. Judy Meltzer from ECCC. Just as Matt mentioned, it's a mixture of incentives and investments. And one of the ways in which we're looking to create economic opportunities by sequestering carbon, for example, in the agriculture sector is through the development of a federal GHG offset system. It's currently under development. We've got draft regulations, and this is going to provide an economic incentive to reduce or remove carbon in activities that aren't carbon priced, including in sectors such as agriculture and forestry. And one of the protocols that we're going to be looking at first to develop is an enhanced soil organic carbon protocols, so that we can create a financial incentive for farmers and recognize some of the innovative work and as a complement to carbon pricing. So I just wanted to mention that as just one example of an incentive that we're developing.
Thank you. I believe this would also be for Mr. King or Mr. Perry. One of the witnesses did testify, and I'm not sure which witnesses. We've had a great number of witnesses, that there was a program, and I don't know if it was a provincial or a federal program, and I wondered if you would know that there was a program to update grain dryers, and this program, she spoke about it, must have been a few years back, and I just don't know if you know anything about the program that was out there.
Thanks for the question. I believe it was referring to a program that the Alberta government had to retrofit grain dryers, and I believe it might have been Ms. Ross from Farmers for Climate Solutions that might have discussed that with the committee previously. So that was the program, I believe, in question.
So you mentioned retrofitting. Do you have any numbers on retrofitting grain dryers of how more efficient they can get? And I guess from this program that she spoke of, there must be some inefficiency in older grain dryers?
Yes, that's my understanding as well. And I believe that Alberta program had been successful in supporting a number of retrofits. I'd have to get back to you with the specifics of that and the improvements that were achieved through that.
Okay. And one quick last question, I believe this would be for Mr. King. If Bill C-206 does pass, what message does this send to other sectors?
Well, that would be a parliamentary decision if it would be passed. It's not for me to say what it would send. That's for Parliament or the government to address.
Okay, thank you. That's the end of my questions, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis, and we're doing great with time. If I may just add a question or a statement, I don't know if any of the witness can help me, but there was some to me misleading information saying that because natural gas or propane has a low humidity content, that the grain would dry a lot faster than other fuels. But in my days on the farm, and I've been around a few dryers, the flame doesn't directly dry the grain. It goes through a heat exchanger. So to me, that's very irrelevant of the fuel. And the other one is, biofuel or not biofuel and biomass heating has been around for a long time. Actually, I have a biomass boiler for over 30 years. and there's been a lot of improvement. I've seen one on the island where they burn straw, and I think there was also some statement saying that, well, if we remove the straw, we'd lose some valuable nutrients. But I mean, we do that all the time when we want to sell straw or other products. But so I'm just curious if if this could be accelerated, because there's already technology out there. So anyway, more of a statement. If somebody wants to comment on that, also I take it. If not, we can move on. If so, I want to thank the panel for being here today. And from the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food, Mr. Goodlet and Matt Perry, thanks for being here with us. And Department of Finance, Phil King and Gervais Coulombe, thank you for being here. And also from Environment, Judy Meltzer, thank you all for being here. So we will suspend for a few minutes and then we'll come back with our final witness. So thank you, and don't go too far. We'll be back shortly. Thanks.
Thanks very much, guys. Really appreciate it.
panel Conseil de l'innovation agroalimentaire.
The Council of the Agri-Food Innovation Council, Mr. Serge Brie, thank you, welcome. We will give you 5 minutes to make your presentation. 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And thank you for inviting me again in front of your committee. The last time I presented in February, there was a snowstorm, and I reflected, I think, on the challenges of internet in rural regions. I'm proud to say that we've had an upgrade in our region, so I should be able to be fine on my internet today. There's no snow as well. When I appeared the last time, it was to discuss processing capacity, and I note that your report has come out, and I would really like to congratulate the committee on a great report that came out and with substantial recommendations. And my hope is that the government will reach out to stakeholders in order to discuss implementation, stakeholders such as ourselves. It would be great to see. But I'm here to discuss Bill C-206, Mr. Chair. And I wanted to mention that first, the intent of the draft legislation is to extend the exemption to some farming operations that use propane and natural gas, the exemption on the carbon tax, visibly. As you know, reducing GHG emissions is a priority. It's a priority for Canada. It is a priority for farmers. However, when there are no viable options, farmers shouldn't be penalized for doing what they do best, feed Canadians and contribute to our economy. We are certainly supportive of this legislation, and we are supportive for the following reason. At this point, there are no viable options that are scalable to serve the whole sector. While there are some new technologies, they still need to be researched, especially as to how they adapt to our particular conditions in Canada. The scalability of those new technology is also an issue. We're simply not there yet. And we must be realistic that we will not be able to scale up those new technologies in the near future. And we've researched the issue, Mr. Chair, we've consulted our members, and it was an almost unanimous response from our members on this issue. Increasing the cost on farmers will lead to some abandoning agriculture, and this will have a negative impact on our jobs, on trade balance, and also our food security. And we should really consider this issue specifically. AIC recently held a webinar on agri-food and climate change, and included international experts such as Dr. Uldada, which is a deputy director at the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, Dr. Ringler with the International Food Policy Research Institute, and Dr. Sally Rocky, a longtime senior civil servant in the US and now executive director at the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research. They all agreed on the following statement: it is important to consider food security when implementing measures to reduce GHG emissions in agriculture. And sustained investments in research and innovations are essential to support reductions in GHG emissions in agriculture and adaptation to climate change. We certainly agree with those two statements from our experts, and we believe that the committee should reflect on those and pass. However, we also do believe the exemption should go to other types of farming. The exemption right now is limited to some types of farming, and we do believe that it is not fair to penalize other types of farmers, such as farmers who have barns and heat animals. It is not fair for them to be left on the side. There's other types of farmers that also do an important work and provide Canada and Canadians with an important service that is required, and we do believe that they should also be considered and supported in through this legislation. Finally, well, not finally, but as well, Mr. Chair, we do believe that the measure should be permanent, and this was a topic of some discussion within our council, but ultimately, The great majority of our members who responded to a survey did indicate that it was important to extend the protection on a permanent basis. And the rationale for this is simple. Farmers make significant investments in material and equipment, and for them to have a temporary measure will increase concerns, will increase their ability to plan financially and to get new machinery. As no machinery and no technology is scalable at this point to enable them to, in a viable manner, have other sources of fuel, such as clean and renewable fuel, we do believe that the measure should be permanent to give them certainty, and I stress the word certainty, that there will be no changes in that in the recent future. But Mr. Chair, there are greener alternatives, and there is the various alternatives such as gasification system, low temperature pyrolysis, anaerobic digesters, battery-based equipment. There certainly are different alternatives, but there are several factors that work against those alternatives. And I did mention that they're often not viable. The price is simply too high, and the price to scale them are not feasible. We also do have to remember that our farmers compete internationally against the US, Russia, Brazil, and other countries. We do have to be careful on that.
Mr. Bria, thank you. So we'll have to move on to the question period. So thanks for your opening statement. And we'll go to Mr. Epp for 6 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Epp.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Bai, for an excellent testimony and also an excellent brief. I will note that it will be very, very difficult to describe your organization as a fly-by-night organization, given I think if I do the math right, you've been around for about 101 years. So thanks to your organization for your service to the agriculture and agri-food value chain. You talk about initially in your brief requiring, at least the time frame around a decade. Can you expand on that? Why a decade? Requiring the exemption for natural gas and propane. Why around that time period?
Well, we are aware that there are new technologies, and we are aware that new technologies will be in place at one point that will potentially offer Canadian farmers other options. We do not believe that it will happen soon. They need to be researched, they need to be tested, they need to be adapted on occasion to our Canadian reality. And then after that, they need to be scaled up in terms of production, in terms of the capacity to distribute, in terms of the manufacturing. So it will take time, and we are very conservative in saying 10 years.
You mentioned also implications to Canada's food security, that if this issue is not approached properly, there could be implications. Obviously, we all know Canada competes internationally. We're a northern climate. Can you expand upon your views and the potential risks around food security?
Well, Mr. Epp, last spring, something happened to me that I never thought was possible. I went to the grocery store, I tried to buy flour, and I couldn't find any on the shelves. And for the first time, a lot of Canadians like myself found ourselves unable to buy things that we found where should have been normally sold. Food security in Canada is certainly a new issue, not maybe for a northern population or for people with poverty, but for a good portion of Canadians, it certainly is a new issue. And we've found some significant challenges in the distribution and other issues. Here, the impact is simple. If some producers decide to close, if some producers decide to abandon or change their focus to other types of farming, the whole system will be affected, and we are very concerned with that. If suddenly a lot of the grain operators decide that heating silos is to maintain the dryness in the grain is not sustainable, and suddenly they start closing, what is our economy going to do? How are we going to produce the grain that feed our cattle, that feed other things, and that we consume ourselves? So this is what we're talking about food security. And I note that it's not just me talking about it. I quoted the 3 different experts from as far as the UN. Those are internationally recognized experts. We have to be careful with measures to limit GHG emissions.
Thank you. You mentioned specifically the heating of barns was carved out. There's no specific mention. I know we've had discussion in the previous panel and at other times is there potential confusion around some other eligible farm equipment. I would assume your members would think that wind fans for orchards and vineyards, irrigation equipment, other things like that powered by natural gas and propane would be considered farm equipment?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Talk about alternatives, that there are some alternatives on the horizon. But so can you talk to me about the efficiency and how the agriculture community responds to incentives, be it financial incentives to explore those versus, for lack of a better term, taxes or punitive. The efficiency of an exemption considered under 206 versus a pay and rebate program.
Incentives are great, and I think we need to have an approach that is mixed. The exemption is essential because the farming community cannot turn around quickly. However, incentives will be needed to support adoption. And if I look at the Biofuels Association of Manitoba, that's one of the things they indicated in their response to us. A mixed approach of incentive and exemption will probably be required in the future to support adoption. But adoption is not just incentives. It's also information. It's also trust. It's also testing. It's also seeing it working. So it will take time, Mr. Hepp.
Thank you. You referenced Canadian-made solutions. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's interesting. There are some solutions in Europe, but the problem is they're not fully tested in Canada, and some of them are not fully working in the same way in our climate. So we do have to be a little bit careful on this, and we would be probably more likely to support Canadian-made solutions, and we need to invest in those solutions. But not only Canadian-made, Canadian commercialized solutions, if I may say. Too often we find a solution, we find an idea, and it goes somewhere else.
Thank you. I'm going to try and get one more question in. Can you speculate, I guess, would be on if the current method of rebates remains in place. Can you contemplate on the level of confidence the ag community has that rebates will stay to $170 a ton if no viable alternatives are there for farmers?
Quickly, Mr. Bree.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of concern in the farming community, Mr. Epp. I think you've heard it quite a bit. We need the rebate and we need the exemption to be there. I think that's what the farming community wants and has asked for.
Thank you, Mr. Bree. Thank you, Mr. Epp. And now we'll go to Madame Bissette for 6 minutes.
Ms. Bissette for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Bree, for being with us today on Bill C-206. The Council says in its brief that this should be a permanent exemption because otherwise there's a dissuading effect on capital investments. So how can we encourage this equipment's purchase, like grain dryers, through the transition? Well, Ms. Bissette, what you're saying is that we should stop drying grain when we have new technologies that are not yet put in place. So I think we have to be very, very careful with that. We shouldn't prevent the purchase of this equipment. We have to produce grain, and the government is encouraging us to increase the export of these products to a level of $60 billion. And in order to be able to do that, we have to continue to move forward. We can't just suddenly say to farmers, well, no, just don't invest until we get new technologies for you that will be able to help you in that kind of situation. Thank you very much. You also recommend investments in the 2021 budget. We have seen several $60 million in research, for example, that is directly for higher efficiency grain dryers. So what, in your opinion, would be the impact over the medium or the midterm? And could we make it move faster with more investments? Well, I have to say, I really congratulate the government with certain investments. We're not just there to criticize. We are there to give our opinions, and certain investments were really well done. But to find a solution that will be more permanent for the entire sector, which is to say new systems for grain drying, for example, that use alternatives, it's going to take more than 50 million here and 30 million there. And it will take a lot more effort, and it will also take a lot more time. So I think that the government should continue to invest and continue to work with the agricultural community on that kind of thing. Thank you very much. Also, in your recommendations, you say that we have to significantly strengthen extension services to support farmers in their adoption of new technologies. Could you talk to us a bit about that recommendation? Absolutely. I'm really happy that you've asked that question. In the 80s and 90s, we had extension services, and they helped farmers better understand the technologies that were being developed and refined. And so this still exists to a certain degree in some provinces, but it's limited. And I think that this is a mistake, a serious one indeed, that has been made. And I think that we need to go back, because farmers will then adopt this new technology better if we reinvest and ensure that people are accompanied and that this is all explained to them. Thank you. One of my colleagues asked a question of a previous witness, and I'd like to hear what you think of it. Are you aware of what other countries are doing in terms of greener technologies and how can we benefit from this internationally? Well, look, that's a good question. It depends on the countries. If you take France and Germany as an example, there are a huge number of projects that are being done to help farmers, and they have a huge influence on the producers. That's not the case in Canada. We're not at the same level. So, yes, they can adopt those technologies. They're very expensive. They're beyond the means of most farmers for what they earn here. But if you look on our side, the concerns that we have in terms of the environment are not necessarily shared by those countries, because they are still in competition with us despite everything. And our farmers have to compete, because if somebody's going to buy their products, they have to be able to compete with those kinds of countries. So that's why I have to say we have to be very careful what we do, because, as we say, you don't want to kill the golden goose. Thank you very much. That's all for me, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Madame Bessette. And now we'll give the floor to Mr. Perron for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Brie, for being with us today. It's greatly appreciated. My first question, I'd like for you to talk to us about the new alternatives that you mentioned very quickly, anaerobic digesters, for example. You're talking about a 10-year timeline. Do you think we can perhaps develop these technologies faster than that? No, I think I said the opposite. I think that it's going to take more time to develop those things. I think that some of those technologies, well, it depends. If we're talking about developing them, we have to interpreter regrets a lost sound for the witness. If you want to bring them to a level where we can deploy them across the country, it's going to take more than 10 years. That's a minimum. Well, what would a support program look like, a federal program, to carry out those kinds of tests and help you? Well, I think that, as Ms. Bessette said earlier, certain investments that have been made in the budget are a step in the right direction, but there will have to be more investment. And I think that we'll have to have a position of cooperation with the government. And you'll see in my brief that I talk about the site of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada and the way in which they present this agriculture to the public. I think that their web page, and for many farmers, is shocking, and it shows an attitude that displays a lack of cooperation. So I think we need to improve that and boost the investments too. I think it will happen, and it will certainly help a great many things on that front. So I see hope, but I think it will take time. Do you think, and we also were happy to see those sums, but do you think that $10 million for clean energy and the investment made in grain dryers are perhaps insufficient? Are you joking? Because that's, well, people might ask me if I think that money grows on trees, but maybe there's some in tax havens that we can recuperate. But go ahead, I'm listening to you. Well, if we can manage to grow money in agriculture, Mr. Perron will be the happiest of all. But in the meantime, money doesn't grow on trees, and we have to deal with what we have. We have to live within our means. Or our ambitions, rather, is what I meant to say. So we want to deal with greenhouse gases, no problems. But when we look at our colleagues in Europe, the investments made on this front are much higher than what they are in Canada, and that's the simple reality. Okay, well, we've heard that many times that agriculture is better supported elsewhere. I want to come back to the test programs. Development of new technologies. Do you see that as in terms of pilot projects? Well, I see that there are already pilot projects that have been set up, and I see, for example, some in Manitoba and some in Quebec as well. These exist. There was a story on the CBC recently about that was very interesting. But in order to encourage this and to put it on a scale that affects the whole sector, it's going to take more than a pilot project. It's going to take more in-depth research than that in the various domains, also on the marketability and the ability for farmers to allow them to get a hold of the basic materials needed so that these new technologies be adopted countrywide. And I think it will take much more than a few just pilot projects. So what will it require? Well, I think it will require an effort between the government and industry, the producers, so that they're all identifying new technologies and make massive investments in their research and in their adoption in order that they be implemented. And I think we will have to do it systematically, but at the same time, directly and with more cooperation, as I've said. So you're saying, I mean, we agree, investments in research and what you said, and you said also to Madame Bessette earlier that this would require a permanent exemption. We heard from witnesses, Mr. Ross, I believe, if my memory serves me well, was talking about a dryer that was newer and more efficient and less polluting than. So do you think people should retrofit their existing grain dryers, and if they have the means to do that, in the meantime waiting for these new technologies to become available? So should we continue to modernize the equipment we have? I think it's a very good question. Since there's no viable technology, we don't want to halt any progress being done. We need to continue to invest into existing technology while carrying out research on new technologies. So for those who've already invested some, it's going to take maybe another 20 years before they reinvest. So the technology that's between the two, I think, do you think will help in terms of pollution? Very quickly, please, in your answer. I think that's a difficult balance to achieve, but we can't stop progress for the moment.
6 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. McGregor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being back before our committee, Mr. Bouy. I appreciate hearing from you on all of this. I guess, you know, when your organization first saw the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act and you go through the definition part of the act, and when you came to the qualifying farm fuel, I mean, it's quite obvious why gasoline and diesel are there, because there aren't any viable alternatives at present that can produce the amount of power that is needed to operate a modern farm. Like you would agree with that statement, right? Yeah. So, did your organization or farmers in general, when the act first came into being, did you have any reaction when you didn't see propane and natural gas listed under the same qualifying farm fuel definition?
We didn't. It was not a topic that was raised directly by us. Other farm groups had been involved, and we got involved when there was a discussion about research and innovation. Where is the research and innovation stance, and where we're at on that? So to provide you, as an example, a better understanding of what the state of the research and innovation is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you know, I think, you know, the intention between like putting a price on pollution is to incentivize a change in behavior, but only if we have an option for people to migrate to. And you know, your comment about incentives being needed to encourage adoption, I think that rings very true for members of this committee. I mean, if you look at zero emission vehicles, a lot of people really only started buying them because they're, you know, here in British Columbia, there's a combined $8,000 federal and provincial rebate you get for purchasing one. And of course, in the early days, they didn't have much range. They weren't as convenient. But now you're starting to get cars on the market that have 400 or 500 kilometer range on a single charge and can do all of the things that a gasoline car, except maybe for a trip right across the province. So it does take some time, but eventually, you know, it's like a snowball effect. It builds up enough pressure that it starts going on its own. In terms of the new technologies that are coming out, you know, what in your view it seems to be the most promising, and are there a lot of companies involved in trying in innovation in this field? Like, is there a lot of competition? Is there a lot of capital investment in trying to find out which one of these new technologies will actually become commercially viable?
So I would say that there are companies in place that are trying to look at alternatives. I had communication with one of them on Friday as an example, that is looking at low temperature pyrolysis. Do not ask me the details of it. I failed science in high school. But there are different options and different systems in place. But yes, I am aware of companies that are looking at this right now, and there are a number of them, including some that are putting some money into it. This is why I believe there is hope, and there will be a change. But we're saying it's going to take reasonably time.
And I did catch your chuckle in your exchange with Mr. Perrona when he mentioned the $10 million over 2 years, might I add. So obviously, if we are going to be serious about this, about powering farms with clean energy and moving off diesel, in your opinion, far more investment is needed in that area.
Well, and Canada is at a junction, right? A few years ago, agriculture was seen as a money sink, where most times the government were subsidizing farmers. Then a couple of years ago, 3-4 years ago, there was the Dominic Barton report, which said, by the way, agriculture and agri-food is a significant player for our economy, job creation, etc. If it is that then we need to be supporting it in the way that our competitors are supporting it, and that will require sizable investments, as we have for other sectors, such as automobile manufacturing, such as gas and the oil sector. So let's look at what we can do, and let's try to invest properly to make things happen in the way that we want it to be.
And finally, in the previous panel of this meeting, officials from the Government of Canada when we were asking about the differences in you know, how diesel and gasoline were listed in the act, but propane and natural gas weren't. I think a suggestion was made that it was because of the way the fuel was delivered. You know, you can easily measure fuels like diesel and gasoline for farm use, but because I guess propane and natural gas are shipped through pipes, if they come to a property, it might be, they suggested it might be hard to distinguish whether it was being used for home heating or your barbecue or actual agricultural activity. Do you have any comments on that suggestion?
You know, I would go back to the same public servants who've mentioned that and ask them when they go to their office, do they charge their personal phones on electricity from the government's office? Should they be charged separately on that? Maybe that should be something we should look at. You know what? If we're going to nickel and dime farmers on this, not a good idea. I think that's, you know, not a very reasonable answer, to be frank.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your testimony today.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. That's the time we have, but I might just pose a question quickly. So we know our biggest competitor, but also our biggest market probably is the US, and we know that there's a changing administration where they're going to really tighten up the carbon emission. And should they impose a carbon price on farmers? And also, they're talking about a tax if they don't deem your product being environmentally sound. So because of our higher heating costs here in Canada, and that, would you think that would change your views on how we should deal with this, and maybe just more put some incentive to develop the technology faster?
Well, I do think we need to develop the technology as fast as we can. We also have a prime minister that says he has a great relationship with the new president, so I'm sure we're not looking at taxes on our products, and I'm sure we're not going to be looking at any of those negative impacts. So let's work on that. I would say let's put some incentives in place. Let's support and finance adoption of those technologies, but let's be careful for the farmers that exist presently. Mr. Chair, you're entirely right. There is a new administration. There's a new sheriff in town, south of the border. Probably a bit less loud than the previous one, but there's a new sheriff in town. We're certainly hopeful to see some positive changes on that. And let me be very clear, Mr. Chair, in a very short period of time, we believe that there should be changes in GHG, and we believe we should reduce GHG emissions. We just believe that we need to do it carefully and not penalize the farming community who's doing so much to help our country.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Brie, for your time here. Very, very interesting. And I want to thank the whole committee. I think this is our last meeting on this topic. So great job. And that will conclude our meeting for today, and we shall see you all on Thursday. Thank you, everyone. Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye for now.
Bonjour tout le monde. Merci beaucoup.
Bonjour.
Bye, everybody. Thanks very much.